Welcome to free audiobooks from Ngân hàng Easy Book Review channel from our Pham. Hope you enjoy all these novels. If you love any books, you can support author by like, share or donate. Thank you.
Sequel of the novel, Egypt, Temptation of the Dream Part 4. Voiced by AI Ava from Clipchamp and Jean, so the story guide. After those shocking moments, the command room fell into a suffocating silence. The large screens continued replaying footage from the reconnaissance cameras, the Anubis statue pursuing, touching each soldier, drawing out their souls as if they were nothing more than fragile flickers of flame. No one spoke. Only the steady hum of the air conditioner and the faint clicking of a desperate officer trying to retrieve satellite data filled the air. Finally, the highest-ranking officer in the room stood up, his eyes still fixed on the screen. "We can't confront it through conventional means." An emergency meeting was convened on the spot. "Whatever it is," one officer said, "it's resistant to artillery and airborne missiles. There's not even a scratch." Another chimed in. "We need stronger weapons. Maybe armor-piercing warheads or high-energy weapons." The entire command room fell silent again. Then the decision was made. They had to call for external assistance. A group of officers immediately began drafting an urgent message, attaching all footage, sensor data, and satellite imagery. None of the data packets were encrypted. They were sent to neighboring nations and global military powers. At the same time, the city nearest the pyramid had been completely abandoned. What was once a bustling tourist hotspot now lay deserted. High-rise hotels stood quietly under the blazing desert sun. The wind blew loose papers across the streets. A dead city, not due to bombs or war, but fear. On social media, numerous videos taken earlier by tourists were going viral at lightning speed. At first, most viewers thought it was a hoax. A new movie? An augmented reality game? AI-generated clickbait? Only when hundreds of videos from different users, shot from different angles, showed the same terrifying scene did the event start to gain traction. Major news channels began to analyze the phenomenon seriously. Occult researchers started appearing on talk shows. Keywords like #Anubis returns, #Ancient Awakening, #Pyramid Unlocked quickly trended worldwide. However, world governments remained silent until a few days later, when they received an official distress call from Egypt, complete with verifiable data. By then, it was no longer a rumor. The world was forced to confront the truth. An ancient entity had awakened, and humanity had no plan for this. Chapter 14. Under the pale blue light of the central command room's large screen, the air grew thick with a heavy silence. Tense faces, bloodshot eyes from sleepless nights and anxiety. An emergency meeting was underway with generals, scientists, and diplomatic representatives from allied nations, and the discussion was no longer about if, but when the monster would cross into their lands. General Alha, head of Egypt's military forces, pointed at the replay footage of the Anubis statue, effortlessly neutralizing both ground assaults and airstrikes. "It's unaffected by artillery. It doesn't respond to long-range missiles. Its golden structure isn't melting. We are facing an entity that defies all known laws of physics." A general from Country M slammed the table. "We need a strategic-level weapon. Possibly a thermonuclear warhead. If we don't stop it soon, it will cross the border and turn the entire Middle East into hell." The representative from Country N spoke with a cold, grave tone. "This catastrophe is not just Egypt's problem. This is a global threat. Like a plague of locusts, it will not stop." Then came the next question. Who awakened the entity? A researcher from the International Institute of Archaeology opened a file and projected images onto the screen. It showed Gene, once celebrated, the man who claimed to have dreamed of treasure beneath the pyramid. He was the one who discovered the entrance to an unknown museum chamber. He was the one who opened the strange box that we temporarily called Egypt's Pandora. That might have been the key that awakened the demon. An Egyptian general slammed the table in fury. "We want to know where Gene is. He must be held responsible for this chaos. So many citizens of Cairo are dead. So many tourists have died. This cannot be overlooked." No one objected. Silence fell once again, but eyes conveyed their agreement. A clear objective had emerged. Gene must be found, and a full-scale annihilation plan must be prepared if they hoped to stop the statue of Anubis before it advanced any further. Outside the command center, sirens continued to wail. Supersonic jets launched from the base. The war between mankind and an ancient god had begun. The setting sun cast long shadows across the crowded streets of the city ahead, the next target in Anubis's path of destruction. It paused at the edge of the first abandoned city, its cold black eyes turning to the pyramid behind it, the place where it had slumbered for millennia. Then, without hesitation, it turned forward again, moving toward life, toward the flickering human souls, the beating hearts echoing behind concrete walls, and the fear not yet fully realized by the people. The moment it left the pyramid, deep within the earth, an ancient stone platform slowly emerged. Its surface, etched with archaic symbols, began to glow, then gently fly into the air, hovering silently, following the statue like a sentient relic. High in the sky, Egyptian military reconnaissance cameras streamed live footage back to Central Command. Once the direction of Anubis's movement was confirmed, the national alarm system was triggered. Red alert! Red alert! Loudspeakers blared across residential zones. All residents of Zone A and the southern outskirts must evacuate immediately. This is a national emergency. A dangerous entity is approaching. People had just begun to settle after the last evacuation, and now the disaster returned. Military units were deployed in the skies. Loudspeakers mounted on helicopters screamed desperately, tearing through the air like cries of despair. And yet, the public didn't understand. Some people looked up and pointed, thinking it was part of a parade or military drill. Others frantically gathered money, jewelry, and land documents. Some herded chickens and cows onto trucks. They couldn't grasp the horror closing in. They don't understand. They think it's just a drill. An Egyptian commander slammed the table, his voice trembling, eyes locked on the screen. They don't believe. They can't accept abandoning everything they've spent their lives building. Meanwhile, those who had fled earlier continued their escape. A second wave of mass evacuation began. A general growled through clenched teeth and slammed his hand down on the table in frustration. Meanwhile, Anubis continued to walk, each step sending tremors through the earth. It didn't need to run. Just walking was enough. It would arrive before the people could fully evacuate. The generals began calculating the remaining time. On one hand, they had to expedite the evacuation. On the other, they were forced to consider. Should they launch a preemptive strike, sacrificing part of the population to stop the statue from moving any further? High above the ground, the sunlight was blocked out by squadrons of fighter jets flying in formation, the roar of their engines ripping through the sky. On the ground below, crowds of people shuffled slowly out of the city like ants fleeing a broken nest, disorganized, unhurried, while others tried to rush them along. Some were still arguing, hesitant to leave behind their possessions. We gave them a chance. We have no other option. The commander's heavy voice echoed through the command center, silencing the room. The final decision was made. Sacrifice the areas too slow to evacuate in order to stop the statue. This was no longer a battle for a city. It was a battle for an entire nation. The operation was launched. Bomber squadrons armed with heavy weapons, including bunker-buster bombs and long-range missiles, received urgent orders to take off. Their sole target, the statue of Anubis. In the streets of City A, as residents still lingered, gathering belongings, the deafening roar of jet engines thundered above. What's going on? Why are those planes here? A man looked up, eyes filled with confusion. But then, a sudden flash of light from beneath the aircraft turned his doubt into horror. In the sky, a barrage of warheads fell from the planes, trailing long white streaks like the claws of death. In the blink of an eye, the sky lit up with explosions as the bombs struck. Boom! The ground split with an ear-shattering blast, shaking the entire city. Towering columns of fire erupted. Shards of debris rained down like a storm of iron. The explosion felt like it tore the sky in half. Blinding light burst forth as the ground shook violently under the simultaneous impact of multiple warheads. Pillars of red fire shot dozens of meters into the air, consuming everything in range. Building fragments, vehicles, and concrete chunks exploded like hail and fell across the city. The statue of Anubis was hit directly. The immense force hurled it off the ground. Its pitch-black body spun through the air, crashing down far away. Thick clouds of smoke rose, shrouding everything in choking chaos. For a moment, the entire area fell into an eerie, breathless silence. Above, the pilots held their breath. Can we confirm target neutralized? Negative, still no clear visuals. Moments later, through the haze, a tall, dark figure began to emerge. Slowly, it stood up. No way, a pilot stammered. Dust and rubble cascaded from its body. The statue of Anubis stretched, then looked skyward. Its glowing eyes locked onto the circling aircraft above. On the screen at the command center, the transmitted image left everyone in stunned silence. The statue was completely unharmed. Not a single scratch. High-level firepower, ineffective. We used almost all of our most powerful warheads in the area, and it's still. A general clenched his fists tightly. We just wiped out an entire residential zone, and it's still untouched. The atmosphere in the command room froze. For the first time, humanity truly felt the crushing weight of helplessness when faced with something that didn't belong to this world. Chapter 15. The city was engulfed in flames. The slow-moving residents, those who had refused to leave, were incinerated in an instant. They never even realized how quickly death had come. The entire area had become a dead zone, leaving behind only ashes and smoke. The statue of Anubis stood amid the ruins, its glowing eyes scanning the skies as if searching for something. Hundreds of souls from the recently deceased were dissolving into the air, light as smoke, faint as mist. But they didn't belong to it. Not a single soul could be captured. It froze. Its eyes widened. Its arm trembled with rage. It could not accept this. A thunderous roar tore through the night sky, so powerful that it sent shivers down the spines of the pilots overhead. Anubis stomped on the ground, each step causing tremors like a localized earthquake. It tilted its head upward, glaring at the circling aircraft with hatred burning in its eyes. But no matter how furious it was, it could not reach them. The humans were too high, too far. With no other choice, the statue turned and resumed its slow, heavy march. Each step carried a curse, a death sentence for wherever it would pass. It walked on, through the ruins, leaving behind fresh scars upon the earth. It wasn't until near midnight, beneath the pitch-black sky, that it finally stopped, after crossing many desolate zones. It came to rest in the middle of an empty plain. Moonlight fell on its dust-covered jackal face, and its eyes had cooled, as if the fury had been swept away by time. It looked up at the night sky one last time, then lowered its gaze to the golden pedestal, the sacred platform that had followed it since it departed from the pyramid, hovering silently as if it were a divine part of its being. Now, It gently descended to the ground before it. The statue stepped onto it, one heavy step at a time. The moment its foot touched the platform, a stream of energy surged back into its body. The stone layers began to harden again, each movement slowing until they came to a complete stop. The statue returned to its inert form, a massive figure, standing silently in the desert, as if it had never come alive. The night was too dark for the aircraft to see clearly. Thermal scanners picked up nothing, and they believed it had vanished from the radar. Only when dawn broke and the sun peaked above the horizon did the pilots realize. The statue was still there, standing motionless atop the golden pedestal, in the heart of a dead land. One pilot, unable to contain himself, opened fire. The shell streaked down like a thunderbolt, exploding beneath the pedestal. Dirt and rock flew in all directions. The platform shook, and the statue was flied away, until falling to the ground with a heavy, echoing crash. But when the dust cleared, they saw the statue was still unharmed. It lay on its side, exactly as it was, clutching its spear, eyes closed. Silent, motionless, as if a nightmare had only been temporarily buried. The signal was relayed back to the command center via military satellite. High-ranking officers, just stirring from restless sleep, received the detailed report on screen. Ancient object remains intact. Currently inactive. Status unknown. Response potential undetermined. A long silence filled the war room. No one spoke. All eyes were fixed on the live images from the battlefield, a colossal ancient statue lying undisturbed in the ruins, not a single crack, not a single scratch. Though it had returned to being a mere statue. One general finally said, "We are facing something modern weaponry cannot touch." Another clenched his fist. "This is no longer a military matter. This is divine." Then came the most important question of all. Why did it awaken now? The world today was at peace. The number of wars had dropped to the lowest point in modern history. Most nations were focused on reconstruction, science, and cooperation. So then, why had an ancient entity from the age of myth suddenly awakened? Who opened that box? Only one name was mentioned. Gene. No one knew Gene was dead. No one saw the moment his soul was consumed by the god statue. They simply believed Gene had fled. Gene was the one who opened Pandora's box. Gene had to be captured to decode this mystery. An international arrest warrant was issued. Gene's face appeared across every news broadcast. Questions poured in from the media, scientists, spiritual experts, and politicians alike. Why was Gene the only one who could find the door? How could an ordinary man overclock an ancient treasure that thousands of experts with modern technology failed to locate? Did he really just dream about it and follow that dream? Days passed under the international manhunt, but Gene's name seemed to vanish from the world. At Cairo International Planeport, there were no records of him boarding any flight. His passport had not been scanned. No fingerprints matched any departing passengers. Gene was still in Egypt, but he had disappeared, completely, without a trace. Agents scoured every corner of the city, from hotels and hostels to roadside markets. No one had seen him. Only the soldiers who once guarded the pyramid knew that Gene had gone there. But nearly all of them were dead. Captured. Devoured during the God's awakening. The trail of information about Gene ended there. A few archaeologists knew, but they had long since fled Egypt. They were too smart to believe brute force could triumph over a god. A few hours after the plane's strike, the unthinkable happened. From the surveillance screens, pilots shouted over the radio. It's moving. Oh God, it's getting up. The jackal-headed statue pressed one hand to the ground and slowly sat up. A heavy rumble echoed across the land. Then it stood fully upright. Behind it, the golden platform floated silently in the air. At Egypt's Supreme Military Command Center, everyone stood in stunned silence, watching the live footage from the battlefield cameras. No one could give an order anymore. All options have failed. We can't stop it. A modern nation, with an army, aircraft, artillery, and satellites, was utterly powerless. At the same moment, neighboring countries convened in emergency meetings. Egypt's situation lit up every breaking news headline, political forum, and strategy group. Will it cross into our borders? Various plans were proposed. Some suggested building massive concrete reinforced walls along the border, meters thick and stretching for miles. Others objected. It's a god statue, not a tank or an army. One swing of its arm could flatten an entire city. Fear quickly strangled all reason. No one was interested in helping Egypt anymore. No one could devise a strategy for Egypt anymore. Everyone was only thinking of themselves. Close the borders. Suspend all trade. Religion is meant for worship, not for war. When darkness takes the form of a god, the light of their faith becomes nothing more than a candle in a storm, flickering and fragile, when the gods no longer care. No one could argue. An ancient entity, immortal, impervious to all weapons, protected by no other gods, was slowly walking across human lands. Each step it took spread despair like a plague. For those prone to pessimism, this could very well be the end of humanity. Chapter 16. Inside Egypt's Supreme Command Center, the atmosphere was thick with tension. On the large screen, a regional map showed every borderline, transportation route, and hot zone currently affected by the jackal-headed statue. We can no longer rely on stopping it, a general said. The only solution is to prepare for a full evacuation, not just from danger zones, but from the entire country. Evacuation? For a population of millions? That's an impossible plan. Silence followed. But everyone knew there was no other choice. The focus of the discussion quickly shifted to coastal nations, especially those bordering the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean, places the statue might not be able to reach if blocked by the sea. We need to request asylum, not just for government and military personnel, but for millions of civilians as well. Coastal countries like T, Y, H, even island nations like M and C, they could be safe destinations. But a cold voice cut in. The real question is, would they agree? A defense leader silently pointed at the map. Egypt is the crossroads of North Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. Once that god destroys this region, the refugee waves won't just come from us, but also from S, L, I, P. In total, we could be looking at over 1 billion people. The room held its breath. How could nations across the ocean possibly take in such numbers? Who would open their borders when even a single wave of refugees could collapse their economy and social order? They'll build walls, block the seas, shut their doors. And then let us all die. A hoarse voice rose. Maybe, even they fear the statue might somehow reach them too. And if that happens, there will be no one left to save us. Despair filled the room. Though they held positions of power, they knew they were just fragile humans facing a force beyond any natural law. If the coastal nations refuse us, what will become of those who stay behind? We are trapped between a monster and the sea. No one answered, but in everyone's eyes, the same thought lingered. We are standing at the beginning of an extinction event. At Egypt's Supreme Command Center, the moment the image of the jackal-headed statue reappeared in the sky, its golden stone pedestal floating behind it, the leaders immediately initiated an emergency video call with neighboring countries and global partners. Only one question was raised. How can they stop the statue's advance? On the large screen, one face after another appeared. Leaders of major nations like D, P, Y, H, N, and T were all present. There was no time for diplomacy or geopolitical analysis. Everyone went straight to the heart of the issue. The leader of P spoke first. We've analyzed the statue's movement speed and mass from the video footage. It is massive, heavy, and walks slowly. It doesn't appear capable of jumping or flying. Therefore, barriers are our most viable solution. The D representative nodded in agreement. We've already begun constructing a reinforced concrete steel fence. Minimum height, 40 meters. Thickness, 100 meters. The interior has a honeycomb structure to absorb impact. If needed, it can be extended to 60 meters. Wise leader added. The barrier will be paired with long-range artillery, surveillance cameras, and motion sensors. We don't hope to destroy it, only to slow it down or trap it in a restricted area. A 4D map was projected, simulating the entire region of North Africa, the Middle East, and neighboring nations. The statue's path was marked in red lines, cutting through Egypt and heading toward the Mediterranean and the Eurasian-African connection zones. Egypt's leader spoke. We're at the center of this continental network. If the statue moves north or east, many nations will be affected. The wall is necessary, but do we have enough time? We're the ones facing it directly. The representative from T replied coldly. We're not counting on Egypt to stop it. Our wall will be built. 60 meters high, 120 meters thick. It will be the final line of defense. And responded. We'll build in Region K. If Egypt falls, we at least need time to prepare our secondary defense lines. This is a battle between mankind and something never before recorded in history. All were in agreement on one point. The statue may not fly or jump, but nothing proved it couldn't evolve. No one mentioned saving Egypt. No one proposed reinforcements. Each country focused solely on protecting themselves with steel, concrete, technology, and time. Tall walls. Thick walls. They are humanity's last hope. We cannot defeat a god. We can only buy time and keep our distance. While the tense video conference continued at the Supreme Command Center across Egypt's major cities, an emergency public media campaign had been launched. Advertising billboards, once used for promoting consumer goods, tourism, or movies, were now simultaneously broadcasting horrifying footage, artillery firing at the jackal-headed god, and the hopeless helplessness of humanity. Every frame had one goal: to instill fear in the public. This is not a natural disaster. This is not a conventional war. This is the rise of a supernatural force. Be ready to leave when the alert comes. These messages repeated across every TV channel, public broadcast speaker, and social media platform. Authorities hoped that fear would prompt citizens to actively prepare for evacuation when the time came. But reality proved much harsher. On the streets of Cairo, people were still laughing, chatting, and taking selfies with the bizarre warning billboards as if it were all a joke. Some believed it, but the majority still thought it was just an elaborate marketing stunt for a high-budget national sci-fi movie. They speculated about a mystery film project or an unreleased reality show. The modern world, where film technology has created countless epic fantasy movies, has made people stop believing in the supernatural. As a result, few actually believed the images being broadcast. No one believed that death was approaching. Only those who had once evacuated truly understood. Media personnel, internal affairs staff, and civil defense volunteers were deployed around the clock to distribute flyers and conduct in-person awareness campaigns. But all they received in return were indifferent stares or tired jokes. The more warnings they gave, the more desensitized people became. Meanwhile, behind the doors of the Supreme Command Room, Egypt's leaders had reached an agreement during the international video conference. A number of coastal nations agreed to grant limited asylum only to individuals deemed elite, with potential contributions in science, medicine, technology, or finance for the new host country. No one mentioned the families of those individuals. No one dared to ask. But everyone knew that in this outdated system, there was always a back door reserved for the families and children of high-ranking officials. As for the rest, the millions still lost between news and rumors. Only the walls remained. Or fate. The national leadership had silently reached their final decision. No more debates were needed. The country's entire computing infrastructure was mobilized to scan, assess, and select the most exceptional individuals based on intelligence, skill, role, and potential contribution to the future. A list was created within just a few hours. Those selected received a direct notification. A special migration, protected by the highest priority clearance. The only condition, they could not bring any family members. Some shed tears but nodded silently, ready to leave immediately, abandoning parents, children, and spouses. Others rejected the privilege and chose to stay behind. The system operated smoothly and swiftly. Drones, heavy transport ships, and digital corridors were all mobilized for the largest evacuation in the country's history. Far away in the desert, the jackal-headed statue continued its solitary march. Its pace was slow, yet tireless. It needed no map, no compass. It simply moved toward signs of life, of souls, as if drawn by some invisible force. High above, surveillance aircraft continued to monitor its journey. Infrared lenses, biological sensors, electronic radar, all running at full capacity to gather data. The jackal-headed statue raised its head. It gripped a crescent-shaped spear, an ancient forgotten symbol, and hurled it into the sky with unimaginable force. The weapon tore through the air, spiraling upwards as if to pierce the heavens. The distance was too great for the attack to hit the aircraft, but the message was clear. It knew it was being watched, and it was not pleased. Across many nations on the continent, an unprecedented campaign was launched. Governments issued emergency orders. All economic, industrial, and commercial activities were to halt immediately. Every resource, from human labor to machines to construction materials, was redirected toward a single goal: high building survival barriers. Citizens, regardless of class or profession, were mobilized. Millions of workers, engineers, and soldiers, along with autonomous robots and heavy machinery, became a colossal machine operating without pause. Barrier walls began to rise everywhere, each block of reinforced concrete hundreds of meters thick, towering toward the sky as if to pierce it. Their strategy was clear: use manpower, machines, and fear to gain speed. With high population density and modern technology, construction was accelerated to a near-absurd pace. The walls stretched across millions of kilometers of borders, no longer just blueprints, but a tangible reality. Yet time remained the greatest enemy. The jackal-headed statue was still approaching. No one knew exactly when it would reach the first gates. But everyone understood one thing. When facing that malevolent being, only two things mattered: the wall or annihilation. Chapter 17. In City of Egypt, the people had been warned many times. The media worked at full capacity, from loudspeakers and outdoor LED screens to close-up videos showing the divine statue destroying other residential areas. All the signs were clear. Disaster was approaching. Yet, under the sweltering midday heat of the Middle East, many people still acted as if nothing was happening. They sat in cafes, gossiped on the sidewalks, or continued trading in bustling marketplaces. To them, everything the government released seemed no different from a propaganda campaign for some grand fantasy film. A divine statue? The supernatural? Come on. They laughed, brushing off all warnings. They had lived here for decades. This was home. Their memories, their lives. Where would they go? How would they live? Their loved ones, friends, and jobs were all here. Leave everything behind just because of a walking statue? They didn't believe it. And they didn't want to believe. But on the far-off horizon, dust and sand began to rise into a thick haze. From afar, the massive jackal-headed statue was slowly advancing. Its presence, even before its full form became visible, made the earth and sky seem to hold their breath. Immediately, an alarm was triggered. Sirens blared, automated gates opened, and convoys of rescue, military, and civilian vehicles began to move. A mass evacuation had begun. People pushed and shoved to get on the vehicles, shouting, sirens, chaos. But many still stayed behind, those who had decided not to leave. They didn't believe and wanted to witness it for themselves. If it were true, they would face it without regret, even in the final moment. And then the unimaginable happened. From the horizon where dust swirled, a massive figure gradually appeared, gleaming gold mixed with jet black, flickering under the scorching desert sun like a mirage dancing between dream and reality. But no one could be sure of anything anymore. Some whispered, "Is someone cosplaying? Or maybe this is just a government stunt." They were stubborn. So stubborn that even as the stream of vehicles carried others out of the city, they stood still, unmoving. Until the 2-meter-tall statue, with the head of Anubis, the ancient symbol of death and judgment, fully stepped into the city. It was alive.
It moved.
It watched. Then, the statue's hand reached out. A person standing closest, still half-doubting, was touched on the forehead by that pitch-black hand. In that moment, a faint shadow, the person's soul, was pulled from their body. No scream. No resistance. Just emptiness. The statue opened the satchel at its side and placed the soul inside, as if it were a small, worthless object. The action repeated, second time, third time, until the cruel truth could no longer be denied. Those who had stood frozen began to panic. Screams echoed through the alleys. They ran in all directions,
Fell.
trampled each other. No one was calm enough to watch anymore. But it was too late. The statue no longer moved at a slow pace. It began to run, like a machine. This was no longer a warning, no longer speculation. Now it was simply life or death. In the city, many Egyptians were still holding on, ignoring the government's warnings. But as chaos spread, screams, trampling, and panic consuming the crowds, everyone was forced to pay attention. Only when they saw with their own eyes the 2-meter-tall Anubis statue collecting human souls did they finally believe the earlier warnings. But by then, it was too late to flee. How could human legs outrun an ancient god? A god that represented death itself. Although they knew it was hopeless, many still risked everything to flee. Some ran with their children in their arms, leaving behind a spouse. Others abandoned all their possessions, hoping only to survive. The convoys that had departed earlier were now stretching far from the city center. Even at a safer distance, the people inside could still hear the screams echoing from behind, making everyone uneasy and tense. In the sky, military aircraft began airstrikes, sacrificing any remaining civilians in a desperate attempt to stop the god statue from advancing, hoping it wouldn't reach the evacuated convoys ahead. Amid the chaos in the city, an Egyptian woman living alone had still not left her home. When everything descended into disorder, she had no time to pack. She simply grabbed her black and white cat and fled the high-rise apartment building. Out on the main road, she looked up to the sky and saw planes dropping bombs. The bombs plummeted with a deafening screech before exploding into columns of fire and smoke. She and her cat were swallowed by the smoke and vanished. The statue continued its march, coldly harvesting the souls of those unfortunate enough to enter its line of sight, unfazed by bombs, explosions, or the trembling earth. The city was slowly turning into a wasteland. Now, the entire city was just a sea of smoke, fire, and ash. Amid the ruins, the only thing still moving was the black and gold statue of the Egyptian jackal god, dashing through the wreckage to collect souls. Although many residential areas had been flattened by the bombings, some people remained alive. Some were severely burned. Others, engulfed in flames, were still writhing in agony. They were perfect targets. One by one, it drew their souls. Once someone died, their soul would automatically detach from the body and fade into nothingness. It couldn't collect those souls, no matter how powerful it was. It looked up at the planes circling above. They were the enemies it could not touch, dark shapes raining death from the sky. A surge of rage welled up inside it, but it was powerless. All it could do was stand there. Only when no one was left alive, when no more souls remained to be harvested, did it raise its head again, gazing at the smoke-choked, blood-red sky. The aircraft still flew above, like flocks of cackling black birds defecating on its face. As if mocking it, it touched the leather pouch on its side, the container holding the freshly harvested souls. Feeling the weight inside, it estimated that it had collected enough, or nearly enough. Without hesitation, it turned around, leaving the city ruins behind, heading straight toward the Khufu Pyramid, the place where it had first been awakened. Deep in the shadows of the pyramid, the other divine statues still stood silently in their places, unmoving. It was returning, not to rest, but to awaken its kin. The number of souls in the pouch might be enough to wake just one more statue. High above, a military drone captured footage of the statue leaving the ruins, as if with a clear purpose. In the command center, all eyes were glued to the screen. They watched its every movement, trying to guess its intent. Why is it going back? What is it planning to do? An officer asked loudly. One staff member brought over the list of ancient artifacts stored in the chamber beneath the pyramid. The Supreme Commander silently took the document, skimmed through it, then stopped. His eyes widened. 12 statues, he whispered. There's not just one. The records confirmed. The vault housed up to 12 ancient god statues. He handed the report to the other officers. No one said a word, but their eyes said everything. They all understood. The god statue wasn't returning to rest. It was going back to awaken something. Or someone. Chapter 18. The final images transmitted back to the command center clearly showed the divine statue leaving the ruined city, turning toward the Khufu Pyramid. Without delay, the footage and analysis reports were urgently packaged and sent to neighboring countries, along with a warning. Within the pyramid, 11 other statues remain. And it's possible that creature is returning to awaken them, or something even more terrifying. The message was not just a warning, it was also a cry for help. The Egyptian government, now overwhelmed, hoped other nations would respond quickly. To begin building containment walls and, if possible, to accept a portion of the refugees. By distributing the displaced among several countries, the burden would lessen.